Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the BEAD or NOFA number 9 pre-application conference. Today we'll be covering some general things, some more specific than others throughout the presentation today. You're going to hear from a number of folks here. We do have on the line to help us support. We've got Jessica Turba, our program administrator. We've got Jake Holmes, who is the BEAD program manager. Got Patrick Wilkie Brown on the line as the geospatial coordinator. Got Brad Horn from DOM's general counsel. Joel Anderson, partner in risk consulting from RSM, will be covering compliance. And I'm Greg Levy. I'm a project manager with FG. So today's agenda, we'll be going over, I'll give you a little bit of a BEAD, just high-level overview. Then I'll bring Jake on to walk through the NOFA with you all. Then I'll present on the BEAD map. We'll go through the core application, the Excel workbook that you'll be using to put your project areas into. We'll review some of the application materials, and then I'll introduce Joel for compliance and monitoring, and we'll talk about the toolkit and the resources that we have available for you. A little bit of housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted along with the slides to the website here shortly after our presentation today. We will have an opportunity throughout this to ask questions regarding the application process. Please use the Q&A chat window, and we will go through at the end of the presentation and answer as many questions as we're able to within the given time. Please note that any answers that are provided today are non-binding on the office. This afternoon, we'll be kicking off the formal Q&A by posting a link on the website. They'll also be in the slides as well for that Q&A form. That'll start today and go through Tuesday, the 15th. So if you want binding responses on questions from the office, you can submit those, and we are going to plan to have those responses posted by the 18th. And then here at the bottom, you'll see our help desk email. So anytime you have questions, feel free to reach out to that email as well. And moving on. So here's a little bit of an overview of the BEAD program in general. Broadband Equity Access and Deployment is the acronym. It's part of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and it's managed by the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, or NTIA. This program is $42.5 billion in funding allocated nationwide, and to the state of Iowa, we will have $400 million in funds to award out to all you applicants, and in an effort to reach all unserved and underserved locations throughout the state. Some of the priorities in the BEAD program, the changes of late, we have become technology neutral. So any technologies that meet the requirements of a minimum of 120 download and 20 megabyte upload speeds, as well as being less than 100 milliseconds in latency. Any of those will be eligible. And then the next prioritization is what's called minimal BEAD outlay. So this factor does consider the overall cost to the program on a per location basis. So minimum cost per location is going to be prioritized. We'll go through the scoring in detail here a little later. Jake will go through that with you, but we'll be able to explain that a little further. On the location side, prioritized are unserved, then underserved, and then finally community anchor institutions. Throughout this process, applicants will define their own project areas utilizing mapping tools. For those of you that have participated in previous rounds, you'll be familiar with this. It's a very similar functioning map. As you select your projects, there's going to be a calculation done based on the percentage of unserved locations versus underserved. And prioritizing projects will also be prioritized by first an unserved service project, which is a project with 80% or greater of unserved locations within the project area. An underserved service project is anything less than 80% of unserved locations within a project area. The sequence of events for the program: we've got the question and answer window that's going to kick off today after this meeting closes. Then we'll have the application window, which starts next Wednesday. Then we'll have a preliminary award notice, and that'll be followed by a little bit of a period for supplemental data collection. Then finally, the state will submit the final proposal to NTIA, and then upon approval, we will go through the final awards and execution of grant agreements. All right, and with that, I'm going to transfer this over to Jake Holmes here. And if I can find my button here. Where are we going? Share. Come on, work with me here. Sharing a window. Go.
Alrighty, thanks, Greg. I'm Jake Holmes, BEAD Program Manager. I'm going to highlight some areas of the NOFA for you here. This is not going to be a comprehensive line-by-line review, so obviously please make sure that you review this in depth with your teams. But starting out here in section 1, so like Greg mentioned, there's $400 million available for broadband grants in Iowa. We have links here to the original BEAD NOFA issued by NTIA, as well as the BEAD restructuring policy notice that made some changes to the requirements in the program. A few things that have not changed are: build out must be completed in providing service no later than 4 years after grant execution. Applications must be designed to provide last mile broadband service to eligible service locations. That broadband service must reliably meet or exceed 100/20 with latency less than or equal to 100 milliseconds. Applicants may request up to 75% in federal matching funds. And DOM has to arrive at a minimum of collection of grant awards that serve all unserved locations in the state. So moving to section 1.3 here, key program definitions. So again, I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but I'm going to highlight a few that are probably most important. So the first one here, allowable expenditures. So this includes expenses directly relating to the construction, improvement, and or acquisition of facilities and telecommunications equipment required to provide qualifying broadband, deployment of infrastructure within eligible multifamily residential buildings, permitting, planning, architectural design, engineering design, and work related to environmental, historical, and cultural reviews, personnel costs, network software upgrades, including cybersecurity solutions, training for cybersecurity professionals. There's the potential for pre-award expenses, and all allowable expenses must be incurred prior to 4 years following execution of the grant agreement. If you scroll down, you'll see a list of disallowed expenditures also. And then if we keep going down, definition of communication service provider. So this defines the types of entities who are eligible for applying to this opportunity. We continue to go down to the low-cost service option. So this was one of the elements that has been changed with the restructuring policy notice. So there's still a requirement here to identify a low-cost service option, but the parameters of the cost are not imposed by anyone other than the applicant. We can go down to priority broadband project. So this essentially means a project that can meet the technical requirements of the program and can easily scale speeds over time. And then right above that, we have non-priority broadband project. So this basically means a project that can meet the technical requirements still, but may not be able to meet the scalability requirements. So on the same page, we have project areas. So like Greg mentioned, the project areas are determined by the applicant. And from our understanding, Iowa was one of the few states that is not imposing defined project areas. Then if we go down a little further to, we have unserved and underserved locations that Greg talked about, as well as unserved service projects and underserved service projects, which we also already mentioned. So section 1.4 outlines the project period, which may not commence prior to award, and again, must be fully completed within 4 years following execution of the grant agreement. Section 1.5 outlines the eligibility and ownership requirements. You can see here who is eligible to submit an application. Please note that the entity who submits the application must own the network constructed with grant funds and facilitate last mile connections to those eligible service locations. Persons submitting the applications may not be a consultant or third party. Projects are subject to the federal property interest guidance issued by NTIA. Obviously, projects must be within the state of Iowa, and applicants must have a unique entity identifier, UEI, and have an active SAM.gov registration. Section 1.6 outlines project requirements and total project costs. Applicants will be required to identify those eligible service locations. Note that if a proposal includes locations on the Meskwaki Nation's tribal lands, that there is a proof of consent from Meskwaki Nation that will be required. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second here, and then obviously total project costs may only be allowable expenditures and be incurred prior to 4 years following execution of that grant agreement. Applicants will be required to provide the budget in our Iowa grants system during application. 1.6 also addresses payments here, and this is the part I will read verbatim. So payments up to 6 months of incurred expenditures associated with the awarded funds may be dispersed to the grantee upon request, but subject to written approval and at the sole discretion of DOM. Any reimbursements are contingent on A, the grantee successfully passing a risk assessment, B, the expense being included in the budget plan, C, documented proof of costs incurred for which reimbursement is sought, D, proof that grantee has incurred the matching percentage amount, and E, the reimbursement includes only expenses incurred following facilitation of service. Otherwise, DOM may limit reimbursement payments in accordance with state accounting enterprise policy. And then the remaining of awarded funds shall be reimbursed in arrears upon project completion, consistent with the terms and conditions of the grant agreement. Okay, we're going to go to 1.7. This outlines information on available funds. Again, we have that $400 million available for grants in Iowa. The maximum funding request is 75%. 1.74 and 1.75 here explain the instances where partial awards may be provided. This would typically occur where there are overlapping locations in multiple applications. Section 3 explains the scoring criteria a little bit more and more about that overlapping location procedure. So I'll get to that once we get down there. Section 1.8. So this outlines the schedule of important dates. As you can see, the timeline here is much more condensed than probably any of us are accustomed to, and more condensed than we had in our original initial proposal. But the reason for this is that 90-day timeline that NTIA has imposed on all states to complete this program. So today, you can see, is that pre-application conference webinar and the beginning of the written question submission opportunity. Again, that closes on the 15th, and then responses will be posted by the 18th. The 16th, July 16th, is the opening of the application acceptance window. That window closes on the 30th. And then application review and project negotiation will conclude on 8/20. And this is where we will complete things like technical review to ensure applications are complete in accordance with applicable law and the NOFA. The scoring will also take place here. The scoring criteria are predetermined and require little to no discretion by DOM. If any applications do not comply with the terms and conditions and requirements, they'll be disqualified and ruled ineligible. In the event where there are overlapping locations contained in one or more applications, DOM will use the criteria described in the NOFA to assign the locations to the correct application. And in the event there are locations that are not included in any application, we will enter into negotiations to incorporate the remaining locations into existing applications. The supplemental data collection phase concludes on 8/31. So this phase is for applicants who have met application requirements and have a preliminary award. This is the time to submit any other required material like environmental, historical preservation documentation, qualifying financial documents, and project documentation with a PE stamp. Then the final agency decision and notice of intent to award will take place on 9/2. Once all preliminary awarded applications have submitted the required material in the supplemental data collection phase, DOM will announce the final agency decisions. And these are still subject to NTIA approval. Risk assessments will occur from 8/20 to 9/2. Final proposal submission to NTIA will occur on 9/4. So there will also be a public comment period prior to that final proposal submission. It's just not listed in here. And then as needed, DOM may implement a remediation phase, which means that we can revisit any phase in this process in order to meet NTIA requirements. Then once NTIA approves our final proposal and all of our awards, then we can enter into grant agreement negotiation and execution. So I think we can skip to section 2 now. Okay, so section 2 is required forms and submissions. This is the information that you'll include when submitting your application. Greg will also be going over some of this information, so you might hear some of these things multiple times. But starting with 2.2.1, general information. So pretty self-explanatory here. These are things like name, address, phone number, etc. 2.2.2, applicant, owner, organization. So this section is going to ask you to detail information about your organization and business structure. It will include things like interested parties in your organization, information about any party holding 10% or more of stock in the applicant, Some of the information here will depend on how your organization is structured. So for example, the information required of a limited partnership may differ from what's required of a general partnership. Here you'll also need to upload resumes for all key management personnel and any necessary org charts detailing all your parent, subsidiary, affiliates. Next is the executive project summary. So here you'll provide brief description of the project, projected construction start date, and then the projected date of completion. 224 is demonstrated experience. So this section's broken up into operational capabilities, financial capabilities, and information on other projects using public funds. It does require applicants to address their experience in the industry, and how you respond in this section also depends on the type of experience that you have. And some questions may or may not apply to each of you. So depending on that experience, you may need to submit information like certifications, any applicable enforcement actions, reports, and then relevant experience. Here you'll also need to submit financial statements audited by an independent CPA from the prior fiscal year, business plans, and related analysis that substantiate the sustainability of the proposed project. So I think we can move to 226 central form. So again, Greg will go over some of these shortly, but I'll highlight a few of them here. I'll start with Exhibit E. So Exhibit E is the grant agreement. Successful applicants will be required to execute a grant agreement. Section 1.8.12 of the NOFA describes the process to propose changes in advance of the application. So obviously this is a very important document to review in full with your legal teams, as you know, if you're awarded, before you can start construction, you'll have to have this agreement signed. Exhibit F is certifications document. So there are a number of certifications listed on Exhibit F, and they relate to things like performance capabilities, legal requirements, financial and technical qualifications, among others. And there are multiple signatures on this document. So once you pull that up and see that, please pay attention to that. You'll have to sign it multiple times. Next, I can hit on professional engineer certification. So as part of the application, the applicant must upload the following documents stamped by a professional engineer and a letter from a professional engineer licensed in accordance with Iowa Chapter 542B, certifying the veracity of the following: network design, diagram, project costs, and build out timeline and milestones for project implementation. So important note here, applicants may submit these documents without a PE stamp during the application process. However, the documents must be stamped by a PE and submitted to DOM before the conclusion of that supplemental data collection phase. So, you know, in order to give you a little bit more time with the condensed timeline to complete some of these, there's that separation there. Next one is environmental and historical preservation pre-screening form. So applicants will be required to upload pre-screening information, which includes historic structures and archaeological sites review using screening tools available from the Office of the State Archaeologist. So this is called iSites, and you'll be provided a link to the website. Essentially, you'll go on there, enter your project area information, and then be able to get some information from that site. Similarly with the Iowa DNR, they have a tool called Permit. Again, you'll be provided the link to that website. You'll go on there, click through the appropriate buttons, enter your project area information, and then you'll get a some sort of report back that you can provide. In this section, you also provide narrative plans for compliance with NEPA and National Historic Preservation Act. Moving down to proof of consent. So this is where if you're proposing project on Meskwaki Nation's tribal lands, you'll have to provide a proof of consent. And so this must include an official letter from the applicant to the Meskwaki Nation and an official letter from the tribal chairman of the Meskwaki Nation signing off on the proposed project. The applicant letter should include a concise description of the project, explanation of the benefit the project brings to the Meskwaki Nation, description of the applicant's expected participation from the Meskwaki Nation, and then any other pertinent information. 227, product pricing form. So this is the form that requires applicants to provide speed and pricing tiers that you'll be offering. And this is where you'll enter the information about the low cost broadband service option. So again, applicants have to provide a low cost broadband service option, but the parameters are not imposed by the state or NTIA. Okay, section 3. So before the NOFA talks about the actual scoring criteria, it talks about this rank ordering procedure. And as part of technical review, applications are grouped. So group A is priority broadband projects, group B is non-priority broadband projects, and then group C is community anchor institutions. So after they're grouped, then the applications are subgrouped, and the subgroups are unserved service projects and underserved service projects. So remember, unserved service project means a project that consists of at least 80% unserved locations. And then the underserved service project means a project that consists of less than 80% unserved locations. So A1 would be priority unserved service projects. A2 is priority underserved service projects. B1, non-priority unserved service projects. B2, non-priority underserved service projects. And then group C is community anchor institutions. So within these subgroups, then each application is ranked based on the lowest cost, because cost is the primary criteria now. And so essentially it will go A1, lowest cost to highest cost, then A2, lowest cost to highest cost. Same for B1, B2, and then group C. Next, we look at overlapping locations. So if a location is present in more than one project and the cost is within 15% of the lowest cost proposed, then the secondary scoring criteria is used to determine which project will be awarded that location. If there are locations that have excessive cost, those are subject to negotiation and or disqualification. And then finally, awards will be made to successful Group A applications, then Group B, then Group C. And so here on the screen is the project grouping table, which outlines those groups and subgroups. So I think we can move to scoring factors. So this is probably one of the bigger changes that that's different from our original initial proposal. And these are, based on that most recent guidance from NTIA. So again, the primary scoring factor here is cost, or how it's titled here is minimal BEAD program outlay. So this is calculated by taking project cost minus the amount of matching funds requested divided by the number of eligible service locations in the project. And lowest cost is the winner. So secondary criteria, this only comes into play where proposals have one or more overlapping locations. And again, that cost of that location is within 15% of the lowest cost proposal. So the secondary criteria, first one is speed to deployment. So this factor takes into consideration the project delivery schedule and timeline as measured by the date of project completion. Applicants proposing earlier dates of project completion will receive higher scores. And this is calculated by cumulative number of days cumulative number of calendar days between the date the application acceptance window opens and the date of project completion proposed in the application. So the cumulative number of calendar days is then compared against all other applicants or all other applications, which results in an early completion date score. Next is speed of network and other technical capabilities, and this includes relative speed and latency. Relative speed here is the average upload and download speed in megabits per second. So the averages of all applicants are compared against each other to calculate the relative speed score, and the highest speed score sets the ceiling for scores of all the applicants. So for example here, if the proposed speed is 100/20, the average is calculated by 100 plus 20 divided by 2, which equals 60. If the proposed speed is 1,000/1,000, the average is calculated by 1,000 plus 1,000 divided by 2, which equals 1,000. The highest average then would earn 100% of the points available, and then the other applications would receive a percentage of the points available depending on their score. Latency. Applicants must respond to this question by providing anticipated latency the customer will experience upon subscribing to the proposed service post-project completion. Latency of less than 30 milliseconds will receive all the points available. Latency of 30 but less than 60 will receive half the points available, and latency greater than 60 will receive no points. Latency may not exceed 100 milliseconds to be eligible for the BEAD program. So scrolling down, we can see the scoring rubric. This just shows the points available for the secondary scoring criteria. There are 100 total points available. Speed to deployment is worth 20. Relative speed is worth 60, and latency is worth 20. If there is still a tie after utilizing the secondary scoring criteria, awards will be based on the primary scoring criteria. So again, reverting back to that lowest cost. The rest of these sections I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on, but obviously please review. So section 4 here lists the attachments. Greg will be going through a lot of these shortly. Section 5 is reference materials. So you'll see things like link to the broadband map, documents from NTIA, and then applicable sections from 2 CFR. Section 6 is a glossary of some additional terms. And then section 7 is NOFA administration terms and conditions. So that's all I have right now. Back to you, Greg.
Ready? Thanks, Jake. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the broadband map version 6. So those links to this directly from the NOFA 9 website. As you get into this, you'll see some instructions, some definitions along the left-hand side. There's a little key down here to show you which locations are served versus underserved. Just by clicking and holding, you can move the map around on screen, zoom in and out with the mouse. To determine your project areas, there's the ability for a selection tool on here. And I'm going to show you kind of how this works. But before we get to that, I'll go up here and show you there are some map layers up here that you can turn on or off. We've got the county boundaries. We've got the eligibility layer, which is all the eligible locations. And then we've got the exchange areas. They're all on by default, but you can turn them on and off. There's also a button here for unlicensed fixed wireless. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. And then there are options to change kind of the look of the map here. So we're talking, whether you want a, the topographic view, there's satellite view, etc. As for the selection tool, and I'm just going to randomly select something here. To get to the selection tool, you click on this button up here in the top right. When you click on that, this window will pop up. In order to select the locations, first you need to activate the selection button. So you click on that, and it's going to turn black. So then you'll be able to select your area. Now there is several different ways you can select. You can select by rectangle, by something called lasso, or a circle. So the lasso allows you to get pretty pointed with where you're selecting. So you click once to start it, and then you click consecutive times so you can grab around the various dots, and then you double click to end it. So then it's going to highlight all of the locations that you selected. It'll give you a count over here. And what you would do next is go to this little button here called Actions. And then there would be the ability right here to export to CSV, and it'll download a CSV file of your locations that you will then paste directly into that core application, which we'll talk about next. There is one other option, and that's to select by exchange. So if you are a provider that is just wanting to serve whatever is available in your exchange, okay, there's a couple of steps to this as well. So we just clear all of this out, go back to the beginning. So if you want to select by exchange, you first activate this button here. And then next is another little click over here to select your exchange. So when you click on this button, again, you'll need to activate it. And then you just put a little box right in the exchange that you want, and it'll select. It'll show you if you want to select multiple exchanges, you can also do that just by dragging through those multiple exchanges. So several different methods there. Once you have the exchange selected or exchanges, then you can come over here and click this button.
Hey, Greg, I'm going to interrupt you real quick. Go up to the selection tool, change it to spatial selection.
Oh, that's right. I apologize. Select by data.
Select by data.
Select by data. Yep. Apology. Thanks for that check. So once you have that done, when you select the right thing, Gregory, all right, we'll hit apply, and then that's going to pull those locations in here. And then again, you can export to CSV. So again, if you're wanting to do it by exchange, let's run through that one more time since I didn't do that quite right. We'll first select this option, the very last one, select by data. Then you'll come over to this selection tool to select by exchange, turn it on, draw your box in the exchange that you would like. Then you click apply, it pulls your locations in, and then you can export it to CSV. Along with the map, we do have a CSV file of the data posted to the website as well. We will be getting a data file layout uploaded there as well that give you definitions of the various columns. And on that layout, you're going to be looking, there's several columns in there, and one of them is final speed. And this brings in eligibility of locations that were served only by unlicensed fixed wireless. So there was a process for those providers to respond to the state with information about their network and the ability to serve all of the identified locations at least 100 over 20. So there were a number of responses that were sufficient evidence, and those have been indicated on this map. There's a little plus sign on them. You have to zoom way in, but in the data file, you will see those locations identified in a couple of the columns and their speed. The final speed is going to show you those locations that are ineligible, listed as a 2. So in the data, 0 represents unserved, 1 represents underserved, and a 2 will represent served. So that will mean those locations are ineligible and will be removed from your project area, essentially. Back to slides here. We went through the map, and now we're going to talk about the core application. So this is a macro-enabled Excel workbook. You'll want to download that from the website. Once you've downloaded it, you'll need to, and you open it for the first time, you want to open it in the Excel app. The web app version is not going to allow the macros to work, which provides automation within this workbook. So if you open that up, you may get a security warning at the top of the screen, and you'll have to click to enable the content, and that will allow macros to run. There may be other security settings at your organization, so you may have to go in and open up other things, but Excel will give you the banner across the top letting you know if that's needed. Within the core application, you're going to find a number of different tabs. There's a menu tab, ESL input tab, then there's an exhibit B, and then exhibit C, and an exhibit D. There's also a core application checklist on the menu tab that's going to help you ensure that you've gotten everything completed. So the menu tab will collect some organization information at the top of the screen with the study code, study area code, provider ID, FRN, and all identifiers assigned by the FCC. Provider ID table will be available in Iowa Grants, and that is the system that you will submit your application in. Step-by-step instructions to complete the core application are listed on the page with hot buttons to jump to the various sections. There's also, by the way, an instruction tutorial in the applicant toolkit that we'll get to here soon. The hot button for step 2 is to refresh exhibit B with the ESL input tab data, and we'll get into that here on the next slide. And then at the bottom of that is a checklist. So ESL input tab, ESL stands for eligible service locations, meaning the blue dots on the Broadband map are locations that are unserved and underserved. You will follow steps from the map selection and export-import instruction to select your project area. So there is a instruction for that map as well. It's called Exhibit K. So once you've gone through and selected your locations, you're going to paste them at the top of the ESL input tab. You'll just copy and paste. It's in the exact same file layout, so it'll be relatively easy for you to do. Once you've pasted those locations in, then you'll go back to the menu tab and click that Refresh Exhibit B with ESL Input Tab Data button. So once you've done that, it's going to take you to Exhibit B, and there's some sample data in this particular image, but you'll see that it has populated. What you will be required to do is at the top of the screen, you'll enter the delivery platform that you're going to be applying to deliver. And then you'll see along the top there's an application calculation section. This will auto-populate. There's nothing that you would enter there. It'll auto-populate as you complete the required steps in the remaining tabs. The prospective product attributes, you enter the latency your project will provide when complete. The relative speed portion of that will be calculated for you, and that's calculated based on where you see this red square. You'll enter in the maximum up and download speed upon project completion to each location. So this is not the max advertised speed, but the delivered speed. So consider any impact, distance, or other factors may have when populating the section of the form. Next is the Exhibit C tab. We have improved the functionality of the core application, allowing for key figures to be auto-populated here. On screen is how it looks prior to completing the other tabs of the workbook. The total estimated costs and total grant requests will populate from Exhibit D, which we'll get to next. The chart you see will auto-populate based on the locations loaded into Exhibit B. This will help you identify whether your project is an unserved or underserved project, which is that 80% threshold that we've talked about before. So an unserved project would be at least 80% of unserved locations in your project, and an underserved project would be anything less than 80% unserved locations. So in this example here, it shows that this project has 60% unserved locations, so therefore would be an underserved service project and fall into that B category. The federal,
Greg,
yes,
Greg, just, and this is calculated again in that file by the final speed column, not a final speed tier, not the column that says speed tier. Just so people are aware of that.
All right. Maximum funding request for BEAD is 75%. Now in section 1.2, you'll see that 75% is auto-populated in there. So if you're going to request the maximum, you don't need to do anything, but you can adjust that lower, as that does have impact to the scoring, as Jake talked through. So you are welcome to request anything less than 75%. You just can't exceed 75%. Next, we'll go to Exhibit D. This is where you'll enter your estimated budget and requested funds. So we have again proved the functionality of this from previous NOFA, providing a drop-down menu for each budget item. So this will allow you to differentiate costs with greater flexibility. You want to ensure your budget items are entered appropriately, as BEAD reporting requirements and progress payments will be gauged against this exhibit. Enter a brief description of the equipment and services to each row in column B as applicable. Another simplification is to allow you to enter the total estimated cost for each budget category, removing the previous requirement to calculate by unit count. Again, the maximum support here is 75%. This will auto-populate based on what you have entered in Exhibit C. The total estimated cost for each line item will then auto-calculate as well, which in turn calculate the remaining fields based on your input to previous tabs. And then lastly, you can go back to that core application checklist, and this will give you, it's going to show complete on here, like this white one here, the matching funds. Otherwise, it's going to have this yellow, and it's going to give you a little note there to tell you this is what you need to do, or this might be what you're missing. As we move on to application materials, and this is going to be entered into Iowa Grants Online. There are a number of sections in there that you will complete, much of which Jake already covered, but that applicant, donor organization information, your executive project summary, demonstrated experience, minority impact statement. You'll again enter your budget, the same one that you just developed in the core application. You will enter the same thing into the Iowa Grants portal as well. Central Forms is where you will upload various required forms for the program, and then lastly, that product pricing form where you put the cost of your low-cost option. Exhibit E is that grant agreement that Jake talked about previously. There is the ability to propose changes if there are something in the agreement that you would like changes. Yeah, there's an opportunity to do that within the Iowa Grants portal. Change requests will not be accepted after submission of the application, so you must request that at the time of application. Exhibit F as Jake mentioned, is the certification form. So you're certifying to adhere to all the BEAD and NOFA requirements, performance capabilities, key legal requirements, labor and contracting, environmental historic preservation requirements. And again, this document does require multiple signatures. Exhibit G, this must be filled out by all applicants, regardless if you are requesting confidentiality or not. But on this request, you'll identify items for redaction, and there's several things there that you cannot redact. Data or information supplied through the project worksheet, Exhibit B or Exhibit C of the core application. Any non-cost related data or information to the budget plan, such as budget line item descriptions. The estimated or actual total project cost, including but not limited to as stated in the budget plan. And any data or information supplied in response to section 2.2.2 of the business organization. Again, all applicants must sign this. There's different places depending on whether you're requesting or not requesting redaction. So back to the core app just for one moment, is if you are requesting confidentiality, on Exhibit D, you will see that there is a redact button at the bottom. So the process for this is emailing the Broadband office to request redaction. Dom will then reply with a password. So once you click that button, it's going to pop up and request a password. We'll give you that password. And then once you click OK on there, there's going to be a redacted version of the core app that blacks out the applicable places, and that spits it out into a PDF that you can then load into Iowa Grants. Next is Exhibit A. Now, this is an application checklist. This is just to help you ensure that you don't miss anything in the application process. So it separates requirements to the application phase from that supplemental data collection phase that we talked about. It's separated that way just to allow additional time to complete some of these requirements, recognizing that this is a condensed timeline. Exhibit I is only needed if you are placing an application for a wireless project, whether it's wireless or LEO. All other submissions do not need to submit this wireless design worksheet. This worksheet is there to gather information about this infrastructure being used so that DOM can assess whether applications proposing these wireless projects are capable of providing the qualifying broadband to the project area within the 4-year timeline. The supplemental data collection. So these are some of the items that will be collected after the preliminary award. So again, that professional engineer certification. If you don't enter that at the time of application, you do have through the supplemental data collection phase in order to get that. But please note that the documents themselves still have to be uploaded at the time of application. And then the environmental historic preservation, again, same deal. That one, you have to submit that information during that time, which runs from the end of the application window through August 31st. And then again, if you're building on Meskwaki lands, that tribal proof of consent will happen during that phase. And then as far as the letter of credit or performance bond requirement, at this stage, you will just be indicating which one you will be pursuing, and then you'll be uploading a letter from your financial institution, essentially saying that they will offer you that letter of credit. So the letter of credit itself is not due until the time of grant execution. So that way you can avoid incurring costs while the applications are being reviewed. And next, the applicant toolkit. So we have a number of resources on the website underneath this section called applicant toolkit. These are all designed to help you with your application and help you understand some of the requirements of the program. So Exhibit J, this is an application instruction guide. This will take you step by step how to enter in your application within the Iowa Grants system. And if you're new to the system, it'll tell you how to get an account as well at the very top. Exhibit K is project selection and data export instructions. So that's designed to help you with the map and how to then paste that CSV export into the core application. There's also a core application tutorial on there to help you with that. There's sample documents, sample cybersecurity and supply chain risk management plans. There's resources available for the environmental and historic preservation. There's examples of letters of credit, bond. There's other informative and sample type documentation there available to assist you as well. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Joel Anderson to talk through compliance and monitoring.
Thank you, Greg. As many of you probably have worked with us through NOFA 6, or no, sorry, NOFA 7, NOFA 8. These are federal funds that are flowing through, so there are federal requirements for compliance and monitoring that we have to put on. NTIA has tried to align as much as possible the BEAD with what Treasury has been putting out for Capital Projects Fund and SLRF Fund for NOFA 7 and NOFA 8, respectively. And in doing so, Dom Do-It has tried to streamline as much as possible to comply with those requirements and still give greatest flexibility through that. So throughout the BEAD program, NTI will conduct ongoing monitoring of eligible entry progress. So that is slightly different than what U.S. Treasury has been doing. U.S. Treasury has allowed for the states to do potentially all of the monitoring with just reporting back to NTIA. Or U.S. Treasury. This time around, NTIA does have a federal program officer assigned to the state of Iowa that will be checking in regularly with Jake and his team. So because of that, there might be additional reporting or requirements that we need to do more often. We will reach out to you to collect that information. Eligible entities will be also required to, with reporting requirements, monitor sub-grantee compliance. That's a fancy way of just saying that the quarterly status reports will still be in effect, and some will even be semi-annually. So expectations are subrecipients can expect a thorough and structured monitoring process. It is going to be very similar to what NOFA 7 and NOFA 8 is in that quarterly status report. Everything will be going through Iowa grants as the other ones also have been. Because of that too, we will still require all communication to go through Iowa grants. So we have a constant history of every time that we've communicated to you about any of the rules and regulations. Because of that too, we will be using a little bit more performance measures on this one and performance monitoring. So that could be on-site visits, which we historically have not used, just because that FPO might require us to have a little bit more touch points with you. We have budgeted for potentially on-site visits, but the desk reviews and self-assessments will be very similar to what you've done in 7 and 8. Subrecipients should then be prepared to provide accurate documentation, including financial records, expenditure reports, and proof of compliance with program guidelines. Those will be very similar to what you've seen in that quarterly status report in previous rounds. We might also have additional one-time reporting to be able to satisfy any requirements that NTIA has agreed. Once again, all of it will go through Iowa grants through that status reports that you are familiar with. And then you might need to share internal policies, procedures, demonstrate your internal controls, and participate in discussions with monitoring staff. This will be very similar to when, if you've ever had a one-on-one meeting with myself and my team and the Dom Do-It staff on what we need to do to verify this. It will also get back to more of that narrative of how do you have internal controls in place? How do we make sure that there's no conflicts of interest or other things that arise? Next slide, Greg. So right now, what we will go through, and a lot of it, Jake has already kind of talked about what you will be doing up on the application part. Basically, we will be, that's you saying, here's what I'm going to do. What me and my team will do over that 4-year build window that you have is, are you doing what you said you will be doing? And then releasing funds as prescribed by your grant agreement, and then doing that final closeout monitoring as well. So semi-annual reporting will just be, once again, what's the speeds that you are actually building out to. You told us in your application what you're going to build out to. We are going to then monitor and see what that is. Your pricing and fees as required by NTIA. Policy notice right now is saying that that might go away, but we want to put that in just in case we're there. That is a good asterisk for me to say. As NTIA does update their guidance on this, we will always update you and update the monitoring plan as needed. So if something does become not needed anymore, we will stop collecting that information. If something does become needed, we will reach out to you to let you know that we do need to collect new information. So as NTIA updates Dom Do It with information that they need, please work with us to know that that is why we are updating this. We want to make this as the least burdensome as possible so that you can get out there and build broadband to those that are unserved and underserved. Those interconnection agreements that we've talked about, the data mapping collection standards that Greg went over and that you are used to seeing on those quarterly status reports. And then this is probably the newest one. U.S. Treasury did not require us to do this, but NTIA and the Department of Commerce does with the completion of the SS 425. We will send that out to you, but make sure that you meet the requirements described in the Department of Commerce Financial Assistance Standard Terms and Conditions. Jake mentioned it. That is where you will need it audit by an independent CPA. That has not been required in the past for the others. Then the BEAD compliance requirements, this will come in most likely during the reimbursement phase of this, but your Build America, Buy America, we will have to check all of your equipment to make sure that what you are placing into service does follow those BABA standards. And if you need any help with that, we will be more than happy to have one-on-one meetings with you to walk through what those are. The National Environmental Policy Act, the NEPA, and the National Historic Preservation Act. Greg's already gone through what you need to do with that. We do need to collect that information for Dom Do It to put through the tool that NTIA has developed for permitting from the entire state side. So we will go through that. Biggest thing on that too is if you do have a structural change or when you start going out into the field to deliver, if you modify your route or something along that line, that will need to be updated if it's a significant modification. So do know that that's kind of where what you're telling us right here up in the application point of view. If it changes, we will need to change and walk through that entire process again with NTIA. But there are legitimate reasons why maps or why routes change due to landscape issues, due to property rights issues. So do know that you might have to go back to your engineer and go through all this process. Once again, that's something different than what we've had to do in NOFA 7 and 8. And then the cybersecurity risk management plan and cyber supply chain risk management plan that Greg has showed that will be in the toolkit. That is going to be more of an attestation. The policy notice did allow for it to go from us fully reviewing it to you showing an attestation that you have one in place and that you have something there. So that's one of those that comes through. And then the BEAD program compliance requirements. That's very much in the NOFA, and we will just be walking through that. But that's, are you serving the locations you're supposed to be serving? Are you doing any of the additional stuff that NTIA will put into the compliance requirements? We will walk through that with you on your one-on-one once you get your approved award. And Greg, that's all for me right now.
All right, thank you, Joel. So on the last slide here, as we wrap up the presentation portion of this, we've got some resources for you. Again, the slides and the recording of this will be posted to the website shortly after we finish here. There's a link to the NOFA 9 website, the BEAD map, and again, our email for the help desk is up here as well. We will get that Q&A link posted to the website also today. And then that formal Q&A period will start, and you will enter your formal questions on the Q&A form. So any questions asked or answered on this call today are not considered binding, and they are not considered part of that formal Q&A process. So just please note that. I know that was a question, a couple of questions that I saw come through there. But at this point here, I'm going to read off some of the questions that you all have sent in, and as a team here, we will do our best to answer. Okay. There's one question on here, Jake, that you can probably help answer. And this is in reference to projects that have both unserved and underserved locations in them. It's along the lines of some of the priority, whether underserved locations would not be funded unless all unserved locations throughout the state are funded. So I think that kind of just goes back to the priority conversation.
Yeah, so the question, if I'm looking at the same one, was if we have a project that has both unserved and underserved locations, the underserved locations will not be funded unless all unserved locations throughout the state are funded. So essentially, that's correct. So DOM's obligation per NTIA is we must serve all unserved locations before we can move and serve other types of locations. So obviously, ideally, we'll get to all unserved and underserved locations, but in this instance, yeah, that would be correct.
Okay. Next one I can speak to is, this is asking around RDOF defaults, saying there's a large number of defaults. Will DOM have any ability to vet applications to make sure this doesn't occur for this program? And the answer is yes. All applicants will be required to go through a risk assessment. We also have, thorough vetting, as we mentioned throughout the application process, of your financial capabilities as well as your production capabilities. So yes, the office does have the ability to vet, and that is a requirement that all applicants will be put through. So that helps us ensure that projects will get completed and defaults will not occur. There is also some language around defaults that Jake had mentioned in Exhibit E in the granted agreement. So as you read that.
Greg, I also want to say that's the real reason why that letter of credit and the performance bond is also on there, so that there is a instrument to either allow for DOM do it to enforce completion, or to have someone else take in and be paid to to complete those areas.
Question here, will fixed wireless access proposals that are awarded also be required to have a PE stamp as part of the data collection period? That is correct. All applicants are required to have a PE stamp in order to be awarded. Submission of an application without a PE stamp would be a disqualifier. So that applies to all applicants. Jake, this next one, does certifying PE need to be certified in the state of Iowa, or does the PE need to be external to the organization? I know that they do not necessarily need to be external to the organization. If you have a PE on staff, certainly use them. But as far as the in-state,
I believe in the NOFA it references a Iowa code section. I don't know, Brad, maybe you can, or Joel, go ahead.
I think that's one that we would certainly look at offline.
Okay, so yeah, in that one, please submit that question through the Q&A process, and we can get you a binding response on that, whether they have to be certified in state or not. Another question on here: can a provider submit more than one application? Yes, they certainly can. You can only like your application. Each application is for one project essentially. So if you're going to apply for projects in different areas of the state, or otherwise dividing it up, it would need to be separate applications. So yes, you can submit multiples. When will the map be available on the website? It is available now. So when you go out there, you can scroll all the way towards the bottom of the NOFA 9 website, and that will get you to the map. This question is about the Iowa Grants portal. Does the portal allow multiple people in our organization to collaborate on the application simultaneously? Does each separate location area require a separate application, or do we submit a single? So that kind of relates to the last one there. Again, if your project encompasses separate areas, you can submit separate proposals, but that might be a decision depending on where those are located. But certainly you can submit separate applications. As far as the portal allowing multiple people, yes, you can have multiple people with access to that portal, and you'll be able to get in and edit and update the application. So that is absolutely possible as well. Some of these questions certainly are more appropriate for the formal Q&A to submit, so we probably are going to skip over some of those, but do remember, if you don't get your question answered here, please submit it through that Q&A. Another question: when will the coming soon files listed in the documentation page be posted? And they will be posted in the near future, certainly by the time the application window goes live next Wednesday. The grants management guide will probably be a little bit later, but yeah, those will be all posted here within the coming days. Okay, here's a question regarding payments. So this may be for Joel or Jake. In the payment section 1.6221, will it be possible to submit more than one 6-month progress payment request? I think they're asking if they can submit more than one payment request. I think that's just referring to that 6-month period.
Yes, you can basically, unlike once again in NOFA 7, NOFA 8, where it was 2 draws with an advance payment and closeout, we, due to the performance bond and letter of credit requirements that do allow for you to lower those, we are going to allow for 6-month draws. So there would be, depending on the length of your program, it could be anywhere from 8 draws, so twice a year for the full 4 years, plus the 9th, or 1-2 draws, but it'll all be decided on at your grant agreement. We will also then, in that one-on-one meeting that I mentioned, we'd work with you to say, hey, here's kind of what we expect for your grant, your draws to look like, due to when you would be going live and placed in service. Jake, I guess anything else to add from that?
No, that's good. Thanks.
Okay. Another question on scoring for you, Jake. If a project is priority but higher cost than a non-priority project, how does the scoring criteria work?
I'm going to find this one so I can read it here. So yeah, that kind of goes back to the grouping and subgrouping. And so those priority projects, essentially are get first crack, but it really depends on the specific location. So if there's an overlapping location, that primary scoring criteria is essentially lowest cost. And so if the only way it would move to somebody else that is not the exact lowest cost is if there is if that location is within 15% of that lowest cost, and it moves through to the secondary scoring criteria and gets flushed out that way.
Hey, Jake, can I ask a clarifying question? When you
Sure.
say lowest cost, what does that mean?
Yeah, so lowest cost in this case is what we define as that minimal BEAD program outlay. And so let me pull it up here. Just want to make sure I get the exact terminology correct. Okay. So again, this is the minimal BEAD program outlay is calculated by taking project cost minus the amount of matching funds requested and then divided by the number of eligible service locations.
Right. Another question here that I can answer, and this is out of section 1631 of the NOFA. Do intersped conduit access points have to be open for others to utilize? And if so, but the answer to that is no. As part of the updated guidance, the requirement for that to be open is no longer there. You are still required to have intersped access points. But if you decide to open those up to others, that is at your discretion. That requirement has gone away. Question on environmental and historic preservation. Process is only partially within the applicant's control, since there is the possibility that awards could be determined by a proposed schedule. Is there a plan to normalize the completion of the NEPA process? Not sure if I completely understand that question. As far as from the applicant side, you're going to be submitting your project documentation, your route maps, your all the things that you eventually have to have signed by the PE. In addition, you'll be going to the state historic website and DNR websites that Jake mentioned earlier. Those are going to show all of the historic locations around the state. So you just kind of compare your route map against that and ensure that you don't have any impact there. And the same from the environmental side, if there's any environmental permitting or things of that nature that may be needed based on your route. There's also a number of categorical exclusions that have been added to this program for environmental review, and those are going to be listed in that applicant toolkit. So take a look at those. We do believe that nearly the majority, if not all, will qualify for a categorical exclusion. But as far as normalizing the process from your end, it's just submitting that information, a little narrative, and then the NTIA has developed a tool that the state will use to have that information reviewed. If additional stuff is needed, we'll reach out and get that to you at that time. far as the rest of the questions that have been submitted in here, I really would encourage you, I'm just in reading through them, we are going to defer you to submit as part of that formal Q&A. And again, that's going to be posted on the website later. These are questions that are just going to take a little more research to ensure that we are, giving you an accurate and binding answer. So given that it's non-binding today, we don't want to cause any confusion by speculating or taking a guess. So at that note, I think we can wrap up a little early here. So again, I do thank you all for your time today. We recognize that this is a condensed timeline, so we're here to help. Reach out to that broadband at dom.iowa.gov. And then again, on that Q&A, that goes through Tuesday. So submit any of these questions that you submitted today that you want a binding response on, and the office will have that to you by the end of next week. And in addition, another reminder, and we'll send out another notice, of course, but the application window will open next Wednesday on the 16th. Thank you all.